Hello everyone, my name is Mohsen and I'm a recently graduate student from Purdue University and currently working in visa research. Today I'll be presenting Deceptive Deletions, which is a new deletion mechanism for protecting the withdrawn posts on online social platforms. This is a joint work with my colleagues from Purdue University and IIT Kharagpur. In today's world, people freely open up about their personal life and opinions on online platforms, which generates millions of posts each day. However, this shared information remains available to the intended and unintended observers and is archived by archival systems. Unfortunately, this long-term exposure of the shared data raises numerous longitudinal privacy concerns for the users. To overcome this exposure problem, users delete their content. Earlier work has shown that about 35% of all Twitter users have deleted their tweets within a 6-year period. However, how effective these deletions are in hiding the unwanted information remains to be studied. Let's look at some case studies. We have seen multiple cases where the post deletions of celebrities and politicians have been publicized. And during the recent elections, publication of these deletions have been no surprise. Further, we also see the publication of deleted content of normal non-celebrity users. Philippa Supreme, which translates to should not delete, is an example of such service that publishes the deleted tweets of not only celebrities and politicians, but also normal daily French users. For example, this is a tweet and retweet that the individual removed from his Twitter account. This user has less than 1,000 followers. We find the problem associated with the content deletions not to be limited to targeted attacks. In fact, today multiple web services are finding and hoarding the deleted contents across different platforms at a large scale, where this information later can be used against the users. Here we're seeing examples of such services for Reddit, Stack Overflow, YouTube, and Twitter. So with all these third-party services and stalkers on multiple different platforms, users are left with the question of what to do with their unwanted content. On one hand, if they delete their content, they may face harassment and blackmail. And on the other hand, if they don't delete, they're exposing some unwanted content on their profile that later can be potentially exploited. So users are facing the damned if I do, damned if I don't dilemma when trying to get rid of their unwanted content. But before we explain our solution to this problem of deletion privacy, let's look at our threat model. We are considering a very strong adversary in terms of data observation. It is able to access the platform continuously and take snapshots of the entire platform with the goal of identifying the deleted posts. It can determine the deleted post by comparing the two snapshots at different times and pinpointing the post that existed in one but not in the second one. Further, the adversary can act as a normal user to add and delete posts from the platform at any time. In this work, our adversary analyzes the data in large scale, which means that it scavenges through all the withdrawn posts to find as many sensitive deletions as possible. Examples of such attacks are the French Twitter account, the different web services that collect the deleted contents on different platforms, state agencies, and anyone that is interested in the deletions of the users as a whole. We do not aim to protect against a devoted stalker or someone who stalks a particular user or post for a long duration. I just want to note that the goal of this study is to raise the bar and increase the task of the adversary in identifying the damaging and sensitive deletions of the users in such a very difficult setting. Before getting into the details of the mechanisms, let's see an overview of the idea behind deceptive deletions. In this technique, when a user is deleting a sensitive post, the system takes multiple posts that are not sensitive but appear to be similar to the sensitive one and deletes them all together. Let's look at an example. Here we have a user that is deleting a sensitive tweet, which is shown in red. The system chooses 4 other tweets that are offered from other users in the system. These 4 green tweets are non-sensitive but look similar to the red sensitive tweet. These green tweets will be our decoy posts. Next, the 5 tweets are deleted altogether. The key point here is that when the malicious entity sees these 5 deletions, it will have a hard time noticing which of these 5 is the sensitive one, as they will all look similar to each other. The reason that this approach works is that what is considered sensitive is a relative matter that changes from one person to another. So what one considers to be sensitive might not be sensitive to another person. Here, we are showing two tweets that talk about marijuana and weed. Assume that one of these tweets is a sensitive tweet to its owner and the other one is the decoy tweet. When a malicious entity that has no background information about the owner of these posts observes these two deletions, it will not know which of the two is the sensitive deletion to its owner. Now that we have looked at the overview of the solution, let's examine the system model. Let's begin by looking at the system players. First, we have the data sharing platform, which could be Twitter or Facebook, which is a public bulletin board where individuals can upload and view content. Users are the post owners that are able to publish and delete their posts and view posts from other users in the system. We also have the adversary that we earlier talked about in the threat model, which seeks the damaging deletions of the users. And finally, we have the challenger, which is the entity that is helping the users to hide their damaging deletions. Next, let's look into the types of posts that we have in the platform. First is the user's deleted post. A user could delete a post for two primary reasons. One, where the post contained damaging content to the user's personal or professional life, or when the post is outdated, contains spelling mistakes, or any other reason that is non-damaging to the user. The goal of the adversary is to find the damaging posts among all the deleted ones that could be used to blackmail and harass the owner of the post. Next, we have the volunteered posts, which are a subset of the non-deleted posts that users willingly offer to be deleted to protect the privacy of other users whenever needed. These volunteer posts are non-damaging and cannot be used by the adversary to blackmail the user of the post. The challenger's goal is to select a subset of the volunteered posts and delete them such that the adversary is unable to distinguish between the damaging and non-damaging post deletions. We denote these posts selected by the challenger as decoy posts. Now that we have introduced the actions of the users and types of posts, let's look how the system will be in the view of the users. In each time interval, we have the users that delete some of their posts. The deleted posts may contain damaging posts as well as non-damaging ones. Further, in each interval, consider that some users offer some of their non-damaging posts to the challenger, which can be used for the protection of the damaging deletions. In the upcoming slides, we will see how each of these posts will play a role in our system. Now let's dig deeper into the adversary's actions and assumptions considered in this paper. In the previous slides, we already talked about the task of the adversary and its access to the data, where it has unlimited access to the user's profile. However, the adversary is not able to obtain the true labels of the deleted posts from the users themselves. Instead, the adversary uses a crowdsourcing service, such as Mechanical Turk, to obtain a proxy of these true labels, which ultimately be used to train its learning model. Since there is a cost associated with acquiring labels from each deleted post from the Mechanical Turkers, the aim of the adversary is to learn to detect the damaging deletions under a budget constraint. We consider two types of budget constraints for the adversary. The limited budget, where the adversary can only obtain the labels for a fixed number of posts. Now, next we have the fixed recurring budget, where the adversary obtains the labels for a fixed number of posts, but within each interval. The adversary with limited budget is called the static adversary, since it does not train after exhausting its budget. On the other hand, the adversary with the fixed recurring budget keeps adapting to the new deletions in each interval, and therefore we call it the adaptive adversary. At every time interval t, the adversary observes all the deletions. Next, it samples part of the deleted post and uses the Mechanical Turk to label the sample dataset. After training, the task of the adversary is to classify the rest of the deleted posts of that interval. The adversary will be evaluated based on its performance on the test data using precision and recall. Now let's look into the actions assumptions of the challenger. The task of the challenger is to obtain volunteered posts and select a subset of them to delete in order to fool the adversary. The challenger can be implemented by the platform or a third-party deletion service. Therefore, unlike the adversary that obtains proxy labels from crowdsourcing platform, it will have access to the true labels of the users. The challenger not only knows the presence of the adversary, but also can observe its behavior. Therefore, we consider three types of accesses that the challenger has to the adversary. First is the no access, where the challenger has no information about the adversary. Second will be the black box access, where the challenger can obtain the adversary's classification probabilities for any post that it would want. And third, we have the restricted black box access, where the challenger can obtain the adversary's classification probabilities, but only for a limited number of posts within each interval. So for the remainder of this talk, we will consider the restricted access, which balances the practicality of the access versus the feasibility of defending against the adversary. The details of the formulation and results about the other two types of accesses can be found in our paper. So at every time interval t, the challenger receives new volunteer posts and adds them to the volunteer set. Next, based on the type of access, it will obtain the adversary classification probabilities for some number of volunteered posts. Finally, it selects decoy posts and deletes them in the next interval. Now that we see where the challenger deleted posts come from, we can complete the diagram by including the challenger's deleted posts from the previous interval, which is t-1. So now that the building blocks are completed, we see that there is an inherent game between the adversary and the challenger in each interval, which we call the deceptive learning game. The game is a two-player, zero-sum, non-cooperative game that is played over a series of intervals. In this game, the players have opposite goals, where in each interval, the adversary wishes to find the user's damaging deletions, and the challenger wishes to hide them by deleting decoy posts. For the sake of time, I'll skip the details of the formulation and move on to the evaluation of the system, but more details can be found in our paper. To evaluate our system, we set to answer two questions. First, we wanted to see, can the real users of social platforms be impacted by the deletion detection attacks? In other words, how easy is it for the attackers to identify the damaging deletions of the users? Second, how well deceptive deletions can prevent the detection of sensitive and damaging deletions. So in this work, we use Twitter as our experimental social media platform, and to evaluate our system, we use two data sources which had slightly over 4,000 tweets, where 1,690 of them were labeled as damaging by the mechanical Turkers. For the experimental setup, we chose to have 10 intervals, and consequently partition our data to 10 intervals as well. For both the adversary and challenger model, we used the state-of-the-art natural language processing BERT model, which has been shown to perform exceedingly well with the NLP tasks. We repeated the experiment for k equals 1, 2, and 5, where k is the number of decoy posts added per damaging deletion. Let's look at the results of the experiment. We start by considering the case where no privacy-preserving deletion mechanism is in place, and therefore meaning that there's no challenger to protect the user's damaging deletions. In such a scenario, we compared the efficiency of different types of adversaries over 10 intervals. The x-axis is showing the intervals, and the y-axis is the performance of the adversary in terms of f-score, where the f-score is derived from the precision and recall. We have three types of adversaries: the random adversary shown in blue, the static adversary shown in orange, and the adaptive adversary shown in green. The random adversary labels the post based on their prior distribution of the deleted tweets, which in our case, there was 42% damaging and 58% non-damaging. And as expected, the f-score was 48%. As we can see, in the first interval, the static adversary achieves a 17 percentage point increase in its f-score compared to the random adversary, and remains almost constant for the rest of the intervals. On the other hand, the adaptive adversary receives new training data every interval and trains its classifier continuously, and therefore is able to increase its f-score even further by about 10 percentage points by the end of the 10th interval. This results highlights that with simple models, even normal users of social media platforms are vulnerable to the detection of their damaging deletions. Now let's look at what happens when we have the challenger that has the restricted black box access to the adversary's model. As a reminder, on the top right corner, we are showing the adversary's performance where there is no challenger. Now let's see how this performance is affected when we have the challenger. We see a major decrease of about 30 percentage points in the adversary performance when we have the challenger in place. Further, as we increase the value of K, which again is the number of decoys per damaging post, the adversary performance even decreases further. In summary, we see that by using decoy deletions, the challenger successfully raises the bar for the adversary even with limited access to the adversary. I conclude this presentation with the main takeaways. In the first step, we showed the importance of deletion privacy in today's world and saw that current social platforms do not provide deletion privacy. Next, we introduced a new deletion mechanism called Deceptive Deletions that protects the sensitive and damaging deletions of the users. Finally, we showed the evaluation of deceptive deletions and saw how effective the mechanism is in raising the bar for the adversary. Thank you all for listening. You can connect with us through Twitter and email. Now I open the floor for any questions you may have. Thank you.